This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Sorry about that. I literally had to fly in from outer space.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. It's all you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast was what I try and do is talk of the stories of film, and I talk of development stories, production stories, behind the scenes stories, marketing stories, release stories, all the bits and bobs really that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. What you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I bring in a guest to talk all things movies. And in this case, you're about to hear a long chat with film critic, presenter, broadcaster Mark Kermode, author as well. I should throw that in as well. This interview is recorded ostensibly in and around the release of the third series of Mark Kermode's Secrets of Cinema TV show, which is on BBC 4 and BBC iPlayer. But I think, as you're about to hear, the conversation goes off in a variety of different ways. And I wanted to talk to him about the current state of movie film criticism, about the pushback that emerging critics are getting, as well as righting one or two wrongs on a film or two I think he's unfairly taken umbrage with in the past. What I'm going to play you is a trailer for the new series of Secrets of Cinema first, as you'll hear once the conversation starts the other side of that. I hadn't quite decided what the leading clip was going to be for this one when I started talking to Mark, but I'll play the trailer. The conversation will start the other side of this.
Why do we root for the little guy? What exactly is a British sense of humour? How does pop transport us to different worlds? What happens when the camera rolls on rock icons? And how on earth do underground films become cult classics? Revealing more of the hidden workings behind the films you love. Mark Kermode's Secrets of Cinema on BBC 4 and iPlayer.
That then was, it was a clip of Britain's most esteemed film critic, Mark Kermode, in full flow. I'm not quite sure at the point I'm recording which clip I'm going to use. I should ask the man himself. Mark, hello.
Hello, how are you doing? How nice to be on the podcast.
Well,
thank you for having me.
Nice to have you. What kind of clip do I use to introduce you now? Because the days of your ranty clips have long gone, really. You've moved away from that almost deliberately, it feels.
Well, I mean, you and I have talked about this.
Yeah.
There comes a point in your life when it's. I mean, there was definitely a moment when I thought I'm less interested in ranting about the things that I don't like than talking about the things that I do. And actually, one of the things, I mean, when I was writing Hatchet Job, I think you and I first met when I was writing The Good, the Bad, and when I was writing Hatchet Job, I remember. Thank you. I remember very clearly thinking, if there is any point to film criticism, it is to do with celebrating things that you think are good. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it's actually harder to talk about or write about the things you love than the things that I mean, you know, there's a certain joy in going off on one about something that you really do. I mean, I won't ever tire of telling people why The Deer Hunter is a load of old trot, but but I thought it was more interesting to sort of try and find things you like. And actually, it was one of the things that you and I first bonded on because, you know, I think you've always had a kind of ethos, and this is true of the magazine and true of everything that you've done. Find the positive, look for the positive, because, you know, okay, we can all join about the things that are bad, but it's harder to find the things that are good. And I just think it's an age. I mean, I'm not saying for 1 minute I've got anything against anyone doing the "this is rubbish" thing. I certainly think when you're younger and angrier, it's, you know, it's like punk rock. It's like, you know, kick over the statues and smash everything, and then by the time you get to a certain age, you go, oh, I quite like that statue. Can I just glue it back together again?
I mean, so I take two things from that. Number one is that I'm going to find a calm clip to introduce you. Nice, you. Sanguine, relaxed, smoking jacket on, slippers, that kind of thing.
Well, actually, all of the Secrets of Cinema stuff is that. I mean, you know,
yes.
all of the stuff in Secrets of Cinema is that, because, you know, rule one, as Kim Newman famously said, was no sneering. Yes. And that was it. And that was absolutely the rule number one of Secrets of Cinema: no sneering.
I'm really glad you've brought that up, because on your esteemed radio program, the excellent Kermode and Mayo's Film Review, in the middle of, I think it was towards the start of last year, you picked a film I'm really quite fond of, the So Bad It's Bad of the week choice. So, I mean, Waterworld, Mark, while you're here, yes. I mean, it seems rude not to bring it up, being that you like to celebrate what's good and you don't like sneering or anything like that. What's the problem with Waterworld? It's fun.
Waterworld's an interesting, I mean, I've written about Waterworld at great length, okay, but the sort of abridged version of it was, in The Good, the Bad, and the Multiplex, what I said was, there's a certain thing with blockbusters, which is that they don't lose money. And I came up with a whole bunch of the rules for how you don't lose money. There are some circumstances under which blockbusters can lose money. But actually, generally, if you're not doing comedy you can lose your shirt over. But and you need to have a star. If you've got an expensive movie with a star in it and a bunch of stuff going on, thanks to the expansion of the global market, and also thanks to the fact of, you know, home viewing, the rise of video, Waterworld was kind of a, no pun intended, watershed moment, because that was a film that everybody thought that, you know, this is going to just destroy financial institutions.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, although it didn't do great, it got terrible reviews and everything when it came out. Actually, it's no longer to do with, do you make your money back? It's to do with how long does it take to make your money back? I mean, Cleopatra famously went into is it the black or the red, which it balanced its books in the mid 1980s due to the home video release, because that was a movie that kind of cost so much money. It was meant to be two films and it ended up being one film. There was no way it could have made its money back. And you know, famously, Carry On Cleo did better than Cleopatra.
That's right.
But simply because Carry On Cleo didn't cost anything, partly because they used the sets that were left behind with Cleopatra when Cleopatra up stumps from London and went off to Cinecittà in Rome.
I do wonder if that's inverted a little bit though in the last few years, in that it's become about how quickly you make your money back again. Because I remember when John Carter came out, for instance, whether you like or don't like John Carter, the clickbait was Disney faces 100 million write down, and that happened on a series of Disney films, which has kind of brought us to the Disney we've got now. And I just wonder if you feel that you've just got less time to make an impact.
Yes, and I mean that is the equation. The equation now is how quickly can you make it back. I mean, obviously, if anyone invests money, the speed with which it comes back is. But the point that I was making, it was a kind of crass and obvious point, was that you can lose money in certain areas. You know, but if you make a very, very cheap movie, you won't lose money because it's very, very cheap. If you make a very, very expensive movie, you will make it back in the end, because things make their money back in the end if they've got a star and they've got spectacle. And actually, this was the point, was that Waterworld was the sort of breakthrough with that. The point at which you can actually lose money is in the mid-range. This was David Putnam's point that he made at the BAFTA some years ago when George Clooney was doing Good Night and Good Luck. Putnam made a big thing of saying, I stopped making movies because it was no longer possible financially to make mid-range movies. Those were the ones that were risky, the ones that cost 40 million and didn't have a massive A-list star and a huge Death Star exploding. Those were the things that were risky. And in fact, Putnam himself said that Clooney was proving him wrong by doing exactly that, by making the kind of movies that he had sort of stepped away from movie making because he just felt that it wasn't possible to make those films anymore. In the case of Waterworld, which is,
fun is the word you're looking for. It's fun.
What is?
It's fun. That's the word you're looking for.
Okay. So I saw Waterworld, but it came. I didn't rate it very much. Although I did interview Dennis Hopper for it for Radio 1. You know, it was kind of, you know, it was fun, and I wrote about it in The Good, the Bad, and I wrote this thing which said, "Here is the plot of Waterworld. Kevin Costner is a fish."
Yes.
No, okay, I know
What's
that's
wrong with
not
that?
literally the plot. No, but in the original script, he had gills.
Yeah.
And then during the course of the rewrites and everything, the gills became more and more residual, because the thing that everyone kept saying was, Kevin Costner is a fish. This movie isn't going to work. Anyway, years later, I was at Universal, and they had the Universal Waterworld ride,
Which is
wasn't another
great.
thing, but it's a performance thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so you sit there, and then basically in the space of about 15 minutes, a bunch of actors on stunt jet skis reenact. Have you seen it?
I have, and I think I know where you're going to end up. I think I can see where your conclusion.
So what happened was, and this kind of tied into my whole thing about, you know, movies have become theme park rides, and actually Waterworld was ahead of the game, but that wasn't the key to it. The key to it was, I thought, well, I'll go along and see this, because I was writing the book, and so when I went along, you know, and then all came on all these people, you know, one of them dressed up as Kevin Costner, and one of them dressed up as Dennis Hopper, and all on the jet skis, and they do the thing, and whoa, and and the water goes everywhere, and, you know, the crowd gets splashed, and I'm sitting on the, you know, they're like the bleachers, and then next door to me, this was in the age before social distancing mattered, there was a whole family on a blanket, right? And they were really enjoying it, like really, really enjoying it. And the water was going, and the sandwiches were going, and the fizzy pop was going, and everything was going. And at the end of it, because I was really fascinated by how much they were enjoying it, and I introduced myself to the guy. I said, "Look, I'm sorry, you know, can I just ask you, do you love Waterworld?" And he said, "I've never seen Waterworld." I said, "Oh, because it's interesting, because you came along to the thing, but you know," and he said, "No, I've never seen Waterworld." I said, "Well, you know, here's the thing about it is," he said, "Is it any good?" I said, "Well, it's not, you know, it's not as good as Jaws." And he went,
Yeah, see, I'll accept that. I'll accept that.
He said, "Is Jaws good?" I went, "It's better than Waterworld."
So bad it's bad, you rated it. That's where I take my...
The thing was, I was at Radio 1 when that film opened, and I remember all the apocalyptic stories about it's going to be the end of, who was it? Was it Corral? I can't remember which studio it was. It was Universal, but
yeah, it was you.
And then of course it wasn't. You know, some years later, this Titanic disaster was enshrined in a very popular theme park ride. So it just went to demonstrate, you know, in the end, Kevin Costner is a fish, is a saleable commodity.
I agree. I think I've got it in 5 formats just over there at the moment.
Good.
I'll send you a spare.
I'm fine, thanks.
It's 11 years since our first chat. I've been looking back over our first conversations, and it strikes.
Simon, did we meet in a screening in Swiss Cottage of something? Or had we met before that?
No, I was writing for Den of Geek at the time, and Den of Geek wasn't that well known, so it was quite a thing to get a long interview, because we had about 30-40 minutes, because I'd read your book and sort of there. And then we went to, I mean, I'm from the Midlands, so I don't do posh very well, but we went to a fairly pleasant hotel where we were just left to talk for like 30-40 minutes. And by the end of it, you were showing me your scars, and I kind of thought, oh, this has gone all right, really, because I had no idea how it was going to go.
It doesn't usually end up with people showing you their scars.
No, I thought that. I've got to be honest, it's not happened since, but that was because that was your first. That was your memoir. That was
it's only a movie, right?
That's
okay.
Right.
And then of course you then turn up in
Hatchet Job. I turned up
in Hatchet Job, because that was the time when we were at a screening of something.
Star Trek Into Darkness. I know what you're on about.
Oh, that's what it was.
Star Trek Into Darkness.
And I was asking you about, you know, what kind of figures the Den of Geek did.
That's right.
And you gave me a number, and I said thousands. That's great. You went, no, millions. Yeah. And I repeated this in the book because I used it as an indication that, you know, that proper journalism could rise to the top on the internet in the same way as everywhere else. And you were a very big part of kind of convincing me that actually there actually really wasn't any different. I mean, I know this now seems obvious to everybody, but you have to remember this was back in the time when even electricity seemed a bit scary. The internet journalism wasn't fundamentally different from print journalism.
I mean, I'm going to come to internet journalism in a bit, actually, because I think that story has moved on an awful lot, not least because of my own committing career suicide, which happened a few years after.
Well done. How's that going?
Oh, it's tremendous. But I do want to talk about the fact that in these 11 years, because when we first met in 2010, and I look back at the questions I was asking you, and it's like, are you going to take over the film program from Jonathan Ross? I think you got asked that quite a lot at the time.
Yeah, and then the answer that I gave you was the same as everyone else. No one's spoken to me about it. There's all this stuff in the newspaper, and the honest truth of it was nobody ever spoke to me about it ever. The only people who ever spoke to me about it were journalists. I was never, people said, "Oh, did you have an audition?" No, none of that happened. Because it's true. No, I never had anything to do with it, ever.
But also at that point, I think it's fair to say you were primarily at that point. It was your film criticism that was your absolute day to day. And if we look at you now, with what you're doing and appreciating film criticism is wrapped up in it all. The breadth of projects you were doing, I think if we could go back 10 years and I told you would be doing a radio program with film scores, you'd have your own podcast where you had the editorial freedom, that Secrets of Cinema was happening as well, that you were doing Radio 2 shows like Celluloid Jukebox and things like that, and as well as in other times, the live shows. I do suspect you probably would have bitten my hand off at that point because you seemed unsure about your own future back then.
Well, I mean, as you know, as a freelancer, being unsure about your future is a natural state of affairs. And I'm I'm delighted. I mean, I'm really, really pleased at how it's all worked out so far. He said, reaching out to touch the wood of the door, because I'm fantastically superstitious about ever saying, as you said, everything. I'm really, really glad about everything that's got me to this moment. But equally, if it said to you, well, you're going to launch your own magazine and you're going to do live shows and you're going to come at MK3D and then we'll do, so I mean, it all, you can never plan any of that stuff, can you? I mean, the fact is, we just got on because I think we share a sort of a core belief in how to do this. I mean, we may not be right, incidentally. I mean, the history may be against us, but I'm really, I mean, Secrets of Cinema, which is what we're sort of nominally talking about. Secrets of Cinema is a great joy, and there's a big piece about it in the new Film Stories magazine, about which I'm hugely grateful, because Film Stories and you were you were there at the beginning of all of this. Were you at Den of Geek when that first show happened? Yeah, fine. Yeah. You were the person who did the first, indeed the only, interview with me and Kim about the beginning of the program, about the beginning of that show, and we'd had a rough ride getting it done, and we were, as you quite rightly say, we were quite rattled, and very, very uncertain. But you had the grace to give us, time to talk about what we were trying to do. And it was interesting because I did a radio show the other day, because the new series is out, and I did a bunch of radio interviews for it. And I did one with a radio show that I'm sure they don't remember this, but they were the very first people to review Secrets of Cinema, and they kicked the crap out of it. And it was really funny because I was on hey, you don't ever complain about this stuff. I mean, they covered it, and that's fine. But I remember sitting in my car and listening to this radio show go out and going, oh, right. Oh, that's very depressing. Maybe it's rubbish. And anyway, then I was on now, and they were going, yeah, well, we love Secrets of Cinema, and it's so great. And part of me was thinking, you've kind of forgotten that you didn't.
Well, what I recall of that interview,
the one with you,
the one that with you and Kim Newman, and it was on the eve of the show launching. And I've interviewed you for an assortment of books and bits and bobs over the years. I've never heard you sound so unsure. I mean,
we were terrified.
It's easy, and it's hard to put that across in print, and I did feel that at the time. But I mean, people say in interviews, "Oh, it's a nice surprise if it does well," and stuff like that. The pair of you legitimately sounded frazzled and terrified.
I thought if we got away with our careers, we'd be lucky.
Was it really that deep, the fear of it? Was it?
Yeah, I was absolutely terrified. I'm absolutely terrified. I mean, absolutely terrified is my normal state, but I was particularly terrified because we'd had a really rough ride getting the show done. And by the time the first series went out, we'd fought so many battles and had so many, it had been such a tough process getting it done that we really couldn't see the wood for the trees anymore. And as you say in the article, John Dass kind of came in and was our like knight in shining armor. He was the person who came in and said, look, I think I can find a way to make this work. But we had I mean, there's no, I don't want to go over old ground again, but
yeah,
it had been a really, really rough process that at one point had involved the entire project, which didn't start with us, me and Kim and Nick and John, started somewhere else, collapsing and us all walking away and, coming back to get it made. So by the time it was finally done, we literally couldn't see the wood for the trees. And I think that when we were sitting in that, I think we were sitting in the foyer of the BFI because I was about to do an MK3D show and Kim was going to come on, and it just by that point we knew there was nothing we could do anymore. It was now done. So whatever we'd done, and I really remember thinking, and I'm not exaggerating this, if I come out of this with my career intact, I'll be lucky. And then either that night or the next night, I was going home because I don't live in London like you. I live like 2 hours away from London. I live in the New Forest. And I think it may have been the next night. Yeah, it must have been because that was a Monday night. I think it must have been the next night. It was a Tuesday night. And I got to Waterloo Station, and there's a Yo Sushi in Waterloo Station. And what I do usually is I wait for the trains to not be packed. I mean, obviously this is a year ago that I've been on the trains caught with one thing and another. But I went into Yo Sushi to have a little bit of food before I got the train. I was waiting till 9 o'clock, and I picked up a copy of the Evening Standard, and I opened the Evening Standard. There was a whole page about Secrets of Cinema, and I thought, oh my God. And I started reading it, and they loved it. And I was like, oh wow, we might have got away with this after all. That was the first moment that I had any sense that we might have actually got away with it.
What I didn't tell you at the time was the preview version they'd sent out to people who were interested in doing press was just full of loads of holding slides as well.
I know.
It was in a real, I'd say about 60% complete. But was clearly great. I think I said that to you at the time. I think I've been pretty vindicated in that since.
You have been. You were absolutely right. And you would.
It just worked.
It was good before anybody else did.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. But I'm curious now because I mean, what is it? The 14th episode you're up to now?
We've done with this series now. It will be 14. Only 13 will be on iPlayer. For some reason, Disaster Movies isn't on iPlayer, which bugs me because I love the Disaster Movies. It's my baby.
But I mean, as you come to the end of 14 of them, with presumably a bit of runway or at least conversations open for more beyond that, I mean, can you kind of capture just what's so special about it for you personally, that the human being behind it?
Yes, but the thing that's special about it for me is the team, and I'm not. That isn't just kind of. I'd like to thank my agent and my mother. As anyone who knows anything about this series knows, that show is made by Kim, who is the lead writer, by John and Nick, who direct and produce, by Jane Long, who is the archivist, the clips archivist, the brilliant clips archivist, who I know that you've spoken to.
Yep.
Danny Carr, who's does the graphics, and then Liam and the whole team who it's made by a group of people, but at the kind of creative production stage at the beginning, it's me, Jane, John, Nick, Kim in a room, or actually, as it happened in this last series, on a Zoom room, because of COVID, we couldn't be in the same place, and that's where the scripts start, and that's where all the thinking process starts, and it is, and the best thing for me is, I've always said this, whether it's to do with journalism or music, the trick is to surround yourself with other people who know better than you do. And I've always done that with bands. I've always been in bands with people who play better than I do, because I think I've got a really good idea for a band, but I can't do it. So let's get a bunch of people who can. And when the Secrets of Cinema thing was starting, because as you know, it wasn't Secrets of Cinema originally. It was another project with another presenter who was
Tricks of the Flicks or something. It was, yeah,
on their own. And with this, I said the only way I can do this is I need a team, and this is the team I need, and it's kind of take it or leave it. And I think at that point they wanted a thing to happen, and so they just went, oh, all right then. And that the team was absolutely the point. And that's the best thing for me, is I love those people and I love the way they work, and they are all better than I am. And I am kind of riding on their, I mean, I'm part of the creative process. I pull my weight and everything, but it could not be done without them, because they really are the core of it all. They could probably make it without me, but I couldn't make it without them.
There was a point where you launched your most recent book, How Does It Feel? And you did a launch of that in London, I recall.
Just before lockdown.
That was a while ago. No, you did a little tour. No, that was the year before, wasn't it? I think you did a little tour as well. I
beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Yeah. No, I'm misremembering. You're absolutely right. Yeah. There was a whole. It was honestly.
You went around the corner. I remember that.
That is an indication of what this has done. I don't remember. Yes, it was 2018. It was 2018. It was 2 years ago. Yeah.
But you'd structured this show that was talking about your life as part of a band, and you held it together for about 98% of the show. And then the sheer emotion of the people you were working with and what you were doing kind of came over you at the end, where you talked about the importance of being in a band is like family to you, and how much that matters. And I just wonder if this is the equivalent of that, because I always get that sense when you talk about the team you work with on Secrets of Cinema.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect analogy. That's exactly what it's like. And I remember the event that you're talking about, and I remember feeling that way about it. And of course, actually, we did do a tour of it. And actually, one of the dates was in Manchester, at home in Manchester, and for a number of personal reasons, that was particularly emotional. And that was the first half of it. I did the show, and the second half of it, the Bottlers played, and then we did some other things with the Dodgers playing, and it is exactly like that. It's a very good analogy. I do feel like it's getting the band back together again every time. It's the Blues Brothers thing, isn't it? And I that is family to me, and that is how I feel about it. And this is why whenever the shows are on, I do tweet all the time. Here are the people that made the show. I did this just the other day before the first one went out. I said, if you like Secrets of Cinema, here are the people that you need to thank. And somebody put a tweet underneath saying, "Ooh, that's very convenient, isn't it? Your name's all over it. But if they don't like it, it's their fault." And I was about to tweet, that's literally the opposite of what I said, but I just thought, I'll just block it. I've got the fastest Twitter block finger in the West, because I just, like we were saying at the beginning, I just can't be doing with conflict anymore.
So, I mean, my sister, when she was learning to drive, she had it's a terrible analogy, but I'm going to go with it. It was just a self-employed driving instructor who was brilliant, but he only wanted a certain number of clients, really. And so his bank manager always tried to get him to expand, but he always thought he's got this perfect little thing going that absolutely suited him. And I wonder, with what you've done with Secrets of Cinema, and what you see how I'm turning this, I'm getting there, what you've done with Secrets of Cinema and what you've done with this team, if there is a beyond to that, were we in different times, would Secrets of Cinema be something you take out on the road? Would it be something that you develop in different ways? I think Kim Newman's talked about possible spin-off ideas and things like that. Or is it important to you, it is what it is now?
Well, it is what it is now. And I mean, for example, one of the things that people say, I mean, in this radio show that I did the other day, they said, well, the thing about this is obviously you've got loads of money for the BBC throwing around, with all this clips clearance. So, and I said, no, we haven't. We don't clear any of those clips. They're all fair dealt. I mean, for people, I imagine some people know, but fair dealing is a way of, you are allowed to use clips from movies in the same way that you can quote things from books under certain circumstances, which is if it comes under, legitimate commentary, criticism and commentary, you are allowed to use clips to illustrate. but that means that you can't turn it into a DVD series, or you can't, because you're using it in the context of a program so that program exists for the BBC, for the TV thing. We couldn't do anything else with it beyond that. Kim and I might at some point write some of this up as a book. I mean, we sort of talked about that, but then, I mean, as you know, Kim's unbelievably busy. I mean, literally finding any time in Kim's schedule is real. I mean, I think my schedule's busy, but Kim's is nuts. And, he's writing reviews and he's writing books and he's writing, he's just always working. The going out on the road thing, when Simon Mayo and I did Movie Doctors, as you know, we went out on the road because you were the guest on a...
No, I wasn't a Movie Doctors, but I remember you...
What did you come on and talk about Superman? God, honestly, my memory is addled. What was the onstage show that I did with you when you did Superman?
That was when you did something at Warwick University, and you told
was
me
that
just
not a Movie Doctors?
I don't think. No, it wasn't. You just told me to come on and talk about a film for 15 minutes. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and you kind of, and
I just picked
for much more than 15 minutes.
I think it's 18. I think. I mean, that was within margin of error.
That was the beginning of your fabulous onstage career, because I think you enjoyed it. I think you kind of got the bug.
I was terrified. I was terrified, and still am, and still feel a complete fraud. I still feel a complete fraud.
Yeah, that won't go away. That won't ever go away.
I quite like it, actually, because I felt it when I first put a podcast out. It's just like I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I'm absolutely certain what I'm doing is me.
Yeah,
so there's a nice paradox for you. And I just thought, because I was coming out of something that hadn't been a lot of fun, where I felt that me was being diluted just a little bit, I needed something for me. And that's where this whole insane project that I'm sat in the middle of came from. The thing that, I mean, I had hair and things like that. And that's all long gone. But yeah, because I remember that Warwick show.
It was great. It was great. And you came on to talk about
Superman 3 is just a
Superman
great film,
3,
though, isn't it?
And you did a really, really funny and extended riff about how do they make this thing happen. He literally types it into
the computer programming. Superman 3 is great. And I started doing shows last year, and I've done that since, and I still maintain it's just great because it's just brilliant.
It was a really, really good set piece. And I thought, oh well, that's it. You should be doing these shows. But as you know, right, there is a real joy in that. There's a real pleasure in it. It's like doing live music. So I don't know. I mean, I think Secrets of Cinema is what it is.
Yeah.
But one of the like Movie Doctors was kind of a spin-off from my relationship with Simon, but it wasn't the Radio 5 show. But it was kind of tangentially connected. I mean, because it's very specifically wasn't the Radio 5 show, because it wasn't a BBC product. It was something that we were doing. But I mean, I've done stuff with Kim over the years, and I mean, many things with Kim. Nick and I have been kind of joined at the hip ever since the Exorcist documentary in 1998, which he made. That was the first really substantial television I did. So, and obviously he was there with Celluloid Jukebox, which Jane was involved with, and John had worked with Neil Brand before, so we're all swimming in the same waters, and I'm absolutely sure that we will all continue doing things together in whatever format it is. But Secrets of Cinema is, I mean, honestly, Simon, the fact that there are 14 of them now, is an astonishment to me. I never thought that would be the case, but I'm really proud of all of them. Really, really proud of all of them. I love those shows. I really do.
What I mean, is Kim any close to getting Paint Your Wagon in? I mean, that's obviously the. I mean, that seems to come up quite a lot.
There's a lovely quote by Roger Ebert, who, as you know, I think is the great humanist film critic. Roger Ebert, when he first reviewed Heaven's Gate, he said, "It's the most scandalous waste of cinematic money I have ever seen. And remember, I've seen Paint Your Wagon."
I'm going to take that as a maybe. One thing I did want to do before we run out of time, if it's okay, is I do want to revisit something that we've talked about in the past, which is the state of film criticism. And going back over the interviews we've done, your daughter was 11 when we first did an interview, by the way, and I know this because you said at that point she knew everything about Esther Williams.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was an era where anyone could get a film by just going into HMV and paying £5. Do you remember those halcyon days?
Yes, I do.
I mean, how quickly all of that changed. In recent weeks, and I know this is something you talked about towards the end of Hatchet Job, where you talk about the various threats and criticisms you've had for your own critical work that you've done. But in recent weeks, there's been a volley of criticism I've seen aimed primarily at young and genre distinct critics, people reviewing comic book movies and such like, over their reviews of Wonder Woman 1984 in particular, irrespective of what anyone thinks of the film, that critics are now being targeted for really liking a comic book movie, to the point where the levels of abuse seem to me, as someone who was moderating comment boards and stuff for a long time, as bad as I've ever seen them.
Right.
We've talked in the past about, because when you started broadcasting film criticism, you did I think it was LBC, you did a radio review that was kind of flopped, but no one could hear it. Just because it was all localized. Now it feels to me, and I'm a glass half full person by nature, but it feels to me that you're having to walk a baptism of fire when you put your work out into the world. And I wonder if you see that, and how you feel about just the whole ecosystem of it at the minute.
Well, so I'm not party to this, to what you're saying about the Wonder Woman thing, partly because I've kind of I filed my Wonder Woman review at the very end of the year, and then I was off, and I was in the middle of Secrets of Cinema, and this is my first week back at work. I had a couple of weeks when I was off. Obviously, there was stuff that we'd filed beforehand. I really like Wonder Woman 1984, so I have no idea what the rest of the world thought of it, because I'll be honest with you, I kind of, I've been dealing with some stuff, and I didn't want to, I had other things to think about other than what so what is the story that people they don't like it, or what's the
original wave of Wonder Woman 1984 reviews came were hugely positive, and then a second wave came that were less positive, and as a consequence, the tidal wave of a significant number of people, enough to register, went for those first wave of critics, feeling that they just, instead of reviewing it, they cheerleaded it. I've seen that as a criticism, but it was going on such a personal level and such an attacking level. I thought this discourse kind of all changed in 2016. That's where I saw it getting really nasty. I just kind of wonder what your snapshot of it is.
Well, I mean, obviously the thing, I mean, I get a lot of, like that, you like that Star Wars movie because you're and I get that far and I just go, block. Because I can't be asked. I mean, I literally can't be asked. So it's, aren't you embarrassed that you like that? Block. You did your Disney palette? Block. Because that's just the kind of the same noise as the as the Trump crowd. They're just all mad people, and I don't want to interact with them. I'm in a kind of slightly easier position because I can afford to do that. It doesn't, there's no cost to me at all. This is why, people say, he blocked me. Why? Because I've got no interest in what you're saying, and I don't need to hear it. It's censorship. No, it's not. You can say it to anybody else. I'm just not interested.
But if you're like 18, 19,
no, exactly.
trying to get your blog out.
This is the point. When I was starting out, I wrote for City Life magazine, and I wrote for Mancunian, and then I graduated from there to the New Musical Express, and it's pretty likely that most of what I wrote at the beginning was available to very few people. And I mean, you'd be hard pressed to actually find copies of the first stuff I wrote. And I'm sure, I know for a fact, in fact, that an awful lot of what I wrote was rubbish, and was factually wrong. And, because this is the age before the internet, you write something, it was printed. It was in the age which, yesterday's news is tomorrow's fish and chip papers. There was no sense that I was opening myself up to the possibility of some horrible response, because usually if you wrote for City Life or something like that, or the New Musical Express or something, the worst anyone could do if they really took objection to it is they could write a letter to the editor that would then arrive by what we now call snail mail, what we used to call post. And then the editor would read it, and it might turn up in the letters page 2 weeks later. I think I do remember writing a review of something for Time Out, and getting a letter from somebody quite significant, somebody like Ian Penman, or somebody saying, "Oh, this review is rubbish and terrible." And I remember feeling, oh, okay, there we go. But they printed it and that was absolutely fine. That is not the same as the situation now, which is, as you and I have discussed before, the best thing about the internet, everyone has access to it. The worst thing about the internet, everyone has access to it. And I think name calling, and I mean, there is a certain area of fandom. I've experienced it in terms of Star Wars, and it does happen around genre movies, particularly Marvel movies, those kind of things, in which the people who have got an opinion, who decide to express their opinion by saying either you're in the pay of Disney or you're this, that, the other. They're horrible people, stupid people sitting at home, basically masturbating over their keyboards. And I have no fucking interest in anything that they have to say. But I'm kind of battle hardened because I'm old and I've had actors threatening to kill me, and I've had people I have literally experienced the "you will never work for insert name of big company here" conversations. I've been through all that stuff. I'm too old for some idiot who's got a particular opinion about a superhero movie or to actually give a damn what they think. But if when I was starting out that happened, I think it would be potentially very distressing. And I think that therefore there is a kind of thing. It's almost like the thing with the internet is you step straight into the fast lane. You don't get any time in the training pool. By the time I was doing stuff that was actually seen by any large number of people, I'd been doing it for a while. It must be kind of very, but I hate any form of piling on, except if it's against Donald Trump, in which case go to it. I hate any form of piling on, and the internet is unfortunately kind of tailor-made for that sort of stuff, that kind of snidey bullying. And one of the things that I think also is that unaccountability brings out the worst in people.
Yeah.
The phrase I've always used is that anonymous internet criticism isn't worth the paper it's not written on. People, when they have the ability to fire stuff off from a keyboard anonymously, turn into monsters. If you look at the history, the kind of abuse that women have received, that anyone who falls under what's now broadly called the diversity bracket, you look at the kind of stuff that they've had to put up with on the internet, the kind of unbelievable foulness of people who say things when they're behind their keyboards that they would never say in person because they're cowards. And so I would say to anybody, if you think that somebody having an opinion about a film gives you the right to get in touch with them and abuse them personally, fuck you. Get a fucking life and stop it. Because it doesn't make everybody think you're brilliant. It makes them think you're an asshole. And if you're a film critic who's starting out and you're writing something and you've received a bunch of abuse for it, stick to your guns. They're just internet keyboard warriors. They don't know anything. Most of them are living in basements in their mother's houses, having their meals made for them, and they don't know how to work the washing machine. Just ignore them. They aren't worth the paper they're not written on.
Just because your words have far more potency than mine on this as well, I just wonder if you could talk to the fact of, because I've been collating quite a few views from critics who've been affected, and the growing risk of going against what's perceived as a hive mind. And I wonder
but the hive mind thing, I hate all that.
Yes.
Will Self wrote in his review of Hatchet Job, which he wrote.
You framed that, by the way, that review.
No, I didn't. I didn't. No need to. It's all over the internet. He talks about how all criticism is irrelevant because it's all to do with the hive mind. Hive mind is crap. Hive mind is something that is written about by stuck-up academic intellectuals who think they understand the internet because they've read about it in books. The hive mind, hive mind is aggregators, which, as you know, I have a particular dislike of aggregators. Yes. Alan Frank said this thing to me once, and it really stuck with me. When he started out in criticism, he said that he was talking to somebody, it may have been his mother even, and she was saying, so hang about a minute, so you write what you think about a film? And he went, yeah. And she said, but is there a right answer? And he said, no, that's the whole point. The whole point is it's opinion. And she went, so your job is to do something in which it's impossible to do it wrong. And Alan said, well, no, there are ways of doing it wrong, but your opinion isn't one of them. The hive mind thing is crap. because opinions are opinions and they are individual. I think there are certain things that you should try and get right. You should try and be factually accurate. You should try and be, judge a film reasonably on its own terms and on your terms. But what you shouldn't do is try and second guess what everybody else thinks. And you certainly shouldn't try and fall in line with a group of people. And to me, the hive mind, it's a weird thing because, it kind of invokes the great intelligence of bees, but it's not. It's just the sound of a crowd. I mean, I don't like crowds. As you know, Simon, I'm actually quite scared of crowds. Crowds frighten me. And I think when we look at what's been happening in Washington, D.C. in the last few weeks, that's exactly why crowds frighten me. People doing things as a group like that, they don't tend to make the best decisions. Hive mind is, it's a load of hooey. If you're a critic, what you're doing is you're writing your opinion. There isn't a right or a wrong answer. And just because honestly, if you don't believe me, look at Kim Newman. I mean, I've seen Kim write eloquently about movies that it was literally illegal to own. And then time proved him right,
There's loath though I am to plug something that I'm involved with, but in issue 22 of Film Stories magazine, there's I really he'll kill me for saying this because I deliberately I'm completely horrible to him, but there's a really brilliant emerging writer, in fact I'd say emerged, called Tom Beasley, who's written a piece, and he went and interviewed.
No, he's a great writer.
Yeah, terrific. And he went, and don't tell him though, because he'll tell me that and then want a pay rise and things.
No, Tom, we've met each other at screenings, and I'd read his stuff before because I recognized his picture.
Don't tell him. He'll listen to this and then he'll want my job. But he interviewed people like Katie Smith Wong. He interviewed Chloe Catchpole, and they're talking about what these barriers were. And there were a couple of things that they brought up, because you say often you've never met anyone who really wanted to be a film critic who couldn't get to be a film critic somehow.
What I said was what tends to happen. To clarify, what I said was what generally happens is that people decide that they actually don't want to be a film critic.
Well, yes, I've seen lots of evidence of that. But what Tom noted is that the decline of print readership and the struggle to find an online model that rewards quality over clickbait has hurt finding outlets that give you any kind of prominence. But also he noted that now, particularly, it's almost impossible to enter the industry, I'm quoting him, without some degree of financial support to assist in navigating the dreaded world of low-paid or even unpaid internships. And then one of the things that I was working on before COVID hit was the fact that if you want to be a film critic in the UK, primarily you had to be in London, or you had to be able to afford the train fare. And I just wonder if you think that the world is clearly turning on its axis now. Yeah. I just wonder if you see a more democratized future in the midst of all of this, if it will reinvent itself a bit.
Well, the point that Tom makes about financing is really important, and this was one of the things. I mean, I wrote about this in Hatchet Job, and it was if you are to be professional at something, you have to get paid for it.
Yes.
When I started out in journalism, there was no sense that you would write for free. You just didn't do it. Okay, I think the very first things I had published maybe were in Mancunian and the Student magazine, and they were probably free or something, or I got a ticket to go and see the thing. But ever since then, I've been paid for everything I've written. I haven't been paid a huge amount for some of the things when I was starting out. I think the NME used to be like 15 quid a review, but it didn't matter. You got paid. I know that you've always had a thing about this, about you pay contributors. I know that Anna Smith and the Critics Circle have got people to sign up to this thing about you don't work for no pay. It is absolutely true that one of the things that the rise of the internet did was took away the possibility of people getting paid in the way that they traditionally used to. And that was one of my worries, was, if somebody's doing something that you do for free, it devalues what it is that you do. And there's no point in railing about it, but it's just true. It's an economic market thing. So I think Tom's got a very good point. And I think that one of the things that does do, as he quite rightly says, is actually anti-democratic, because what it does is it means that you can only start doing it if you already have some form of financial, support. And that wasn't the case in the 80s. I've talked to Caitlin Moran about this, because she remembers Same as me writing for, I mean, we have very different backgrounds. I'm a middle-class kid, absolutely. You know, she's got a very, very different background story. But when we first began, we worked and we got paid for what we did. And that was how we made a living. And it's much harder now. I'm always afeared of writing anything off and saying, oh, it's all terrible. But there is an issue. There is definitely an issue at the moment, which is that you are one of the people who is taking on new writers and paying them. And it's been a thing that you've talked about, and it's an ethos that you've stuck to no matter what and you are doing that in a world in which an awful lot of people are being told, do this for free, for access, it'll be good for you. And as I said in Hatchet Job, unless you own the site, unless it's your site that you're writing for, don't do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're writing for somebody else, you need to be properly rewarded for it. And I know that means, unfortunately, that they might go, okay, we'll get somebody else. But, you know, this is why, sorry to sound like an old trot, but this is why unions are important. This is why that whole move to get critics to refuse to work for nothing is important. Because actually, it's only if everybody refuses to work for nothing that it starts to have any impact. I'm going to start singing, there is power in a factory, power in the land, power in the hands of the worker.
You're not getting the harmonica out, are you?
But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in a union. I'm sorry, but it's true.
I always think of Pride with that song, though, which is just like one
God, I love
amazing film. One thing, just in the midst of this conversation, I think it's worth putting in just for someone who's listening to it, is I went to a presentation where there were panelists from a bunch of American bloggers, really. I think that's how they describe themselves. And their argument was, if someone's asking you to work for free, just put it on your Twitter feed, because at least then you own it. Just write it up as a piece of text and just tweet it out. And if someone wants to do that towards me, I will retweet that if that helps them. Just to, you know, just because then at least it's yours.
Okay,
and well, at least that's a way to. But it doesn't pay the bills. But it's not someone fleecing you at that point. Where are you just in terms? I mean, I drawing this somewhere close to a close. But where are you personally now, just in terms of the stuff that you're looking to do? And where are your feelings? Because I keep going back to the end of Hatchet Job and the positivity at the end of the book that you wrote about film criticism. Yeah. I'm just wondering, I mean, were you writing a Hatchet Job 2 now? What do you think your conclusions would be more likely to be?
I mean, I think there isn't a Hatchet Job 2 because I kind of got it out of my system. There's a lot of things wrong with that book, but none of the things that Will Self thinks are wrong with it, incidentally. But I stand by it because it was a book written at a moment of crisis. And, you know, what is it? Kim Newman described it as 350 pages of somebody pissing and moaning about having a really nice job. And which is very Kim.
But it's worth noting, you talk about a moment of crisis. Sorry to interrupt, but that was as much personal crisis for you at that point, wasn't it? That you were contemplating the end of what you were doing.
Yeah, I genuinely looked for work elsewhere. Actually, I started, I had kind of done with it, and then through a whole bunch of things, including my conversations with you, I came out the other end of it. And I think that the industry came out the other end of it to some extent, although the industry has fundamentally changed. It's different to what it was. But I don't believe in it was all great and now it is all terrible, because I think that's kind of, that's the nostalgist. I'm a big nostalgist, but I think it's just that's a kind of fetish rather than a truth. It's something that's nice to believe in. Honestly, I still think that if you really want to do it and you're really dedicated to doing it and you've got particularly thick skin, I do still think it is possible to do it and to do it well and to do it properly and to make a living out of it. But I would also say, I'm coming up to 60 and part of me feels
you don't look it. Did I say that in time?
You did. It was a slight delay on
okay, I'll edit that out, don't you worry.
But part of me kind of feels like I've fought the battles that I was going to fight, and I'm very, very, very lucky and grateful to have got to where I got to. But I look behind me and I see people coming up, and I think they're doing the work. I mean, I look at Simran and Wendy, and who I work with at the Observer, and they're sharp. They're smart, and they're making it work. They are making it work. And I kind of think their opinion is more valid. I think there's a point at which you probably should step aside. And I have thought about that quite a lot recently, not because I don't love it, but because there comes a point when you kind of look at the people coming up behind you, and they're simply better, they're sharper and more agile, and it's probably, it's time for them. I'll carry on doing this for the moment because I'm really enjoying it. And obviously the Kermode and Mayo show is a bit of a, that's not something I think that could just be easily replaced by other people, because it's kind of what it is. It's something that we've built up, and I'm really proud of. And it feels
it's
like
the Morecambe and Wise film review show, isn't it?
Thank you very much. And I take that as the highest form of compliment. But I think if I was starting out now, it would be an entirely different world, and the challenges that people have to face. I mean, I will say this to anybody who's listening, who's an up and coming film critic. Seriously, you have both my encouragement and my sympathy. You are trying to do something now in a world which is very different to the world that I tried to do it in. And on the one hand, there is a huge amount of opportunity because you can get your voice out there. On the other hand, with that comes the fact that so can everyone else. And so the competition, it's like Ben Wheatley saying that Twitter is like hearing the whole audience talking all the time. And I think that, the next generation of film critics will have to be infinitely tougher than I ever was, and infinitely better because they can be fact-checked in real time in a way that I never could. But I still think that the essential principles are the same. And I would still say, try not to be cowed. If people tell you you're brilliant, great. Take it with a pinch of salt, because for every one person who thinks you're brilliant, there's somebody out there who thinks you're terrible. I mean, the Secrets of Cinema series every single one has been kicked into the ground by this guy in the Daily Mail who just hates the show. Well,
that's a badge of honor, though.
I know, exactly, and that's fine.
Do you remember when
nice.
Ben Wheatley used to tweet out when he got a 1-star review from Christopher Tuckey, who threatened to sue you, of course, once upon a time in the Daily Mail? I haven't brought that up for a while.
He did, yeah.
He wrote it in his book. I sat on a stage and read you the passage. Memory serves.
Did he threaten to sue me, or did he threaten to sue Julian?
No, I think it was you.
Me.
I'm quite happy to dig the book.
No, it's fine. No, I'm sure. Listen, I mean, again, as I said, I've been threatened by years and years ago. I was threatened by the Miramax lawyers. I wrote a piece about Dust Devil for Sight and Sound, and they rang me up and they threatened to sue me, not the magazine, but me personally. And then they never did. And then I was really terrified. I was just starting out. I didn't even know they got my phone number. And
that was always their way, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And that was exactly. Somebody said to me, I said, "Oh, that's what they do. That's just what they do. They just ring you up and threaten you." I mean, of course. So when everyone said, "Hey, Harvey Weinstein's a bully," it was like, yeah, that's it. I mean, did anyone ever think he was anything other than that?
Yeah.
So just what's it? Courage, mon brave. Just try to roll with it. Try to remain true to what you do yourself. You're almost certainly better than I am at this. And if a chancer like me can get this far, then so can you. But I would also say that the greatest dropout in film criticism is to do with people realizing that they don't actually want to do it because they don't like the world. It can be a hostile world, much more so now than it ever used to be. Much more so now than it ever used to be. You can get people sniping on Twitter and the internet in a way that you never heard before. I'm sure enough people hated what I did at the beginning. I just never heard from them.
Well, let's end on something more upbeat. Obviously, I hope you keep going, because Waterworld aside, I think I don't want you thinking I'm bearing grudges. I don't send tweets about this. I record podcasts purely to get you back. I mean, more Secrets of Cinema, the long term of Wittertainment. Are you going to write your film music book?
I am writing the film music book. I've done a whole bunch of interviews for it, but it's just, weirdly enough, lockdown, everyone said, "Oh, it's great. We can all learn languages. No, we can't. You're just dealing with you're fighting fire every day, aren't you? It's just like, it's weird. Everyone, you're at home, you must have much more time. No, I've got no time at all. I am writing the film music book. That is happening. It's just taking much longer than it should have done, but it is happening. I've done a bunch of interviews for it, with Warren Ellis and Anita Desai and Johnny Greenwood, and so I've done a bunch of things for it. I just haven't actually written the damn thing yet. Wittertainment will go on until such time as Simon Mayo gets fed up with it, which will be before I get fed up with it. I could carry on doing it until I drop off my perch, but he
try not to do that.
No, well, I try not to, but it'll happen at the time. He'll know when to call time on it, not me, and he will call time on it when it's ready. Secrets of Cinema, of course, we'd love to do another one, but as we told you in that interview, we for every when we finished the last series, which was either 3 or 4, not the one that that's gone out, the one for that. I remember standing on set saying to everybody, "Okay, well, that's it. They're not commissioning anymore. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you, and I really hope that we get to see each other again." And then when we got back with this one, it was like, here we are again. I mean, as Kim always says, it's a good value show. I mean, it is not an expensive show, and yet, as that radio show said, God, it looks like you got loads of money. Yeah, no.
It kind of feels like you found home. That's how I always,
that's what it feels like to me.
I always see it. Mark Kermode, as always, in spite of 1 or 2 incorrect opinions that I will edit out and make myself sound far more intelligent, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for your time. And that brings me to the end of my conversation with Mark. You can find Mark Kermode's Secrets of Cinema on BBC4 and BBC iPlayer. As he mentioned in the chat, virtually all of the episodes, apart from his favourite, is available on the iPlayer service at the moment. You can find more from you can get more of my waffling on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can find more from the entire Film Stories project at our website, filmstories.co.uk, which is updated daily. Every weekday with movie news, features, reviews and such like. You can also find full details of all of our magazines, including the issue that we talked about, where Mark takes us behind the scenes of Secrets of Cinema with his team. You can find that at store.filmstories.co.uk. Film Stories project is also on YouTube at youtube.com/filmstories, on Facebook at facebook.com/filmstoriesonline, on Twitter at filmstoriespod. That's it. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories, though, and I thank you as always for lending me your ears to listen to this one. I hope you found that interesting. Most important thing, particularly in the times we find ourselves when this has been recorded, you all stay safe and look after yourselves and take care. Thank you as always for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.